Hello, everybody, and welcome to our presentation. Our title is Facilitating Participant-Centered Online Qualitative Research, Health Research During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I'm Dr. Michelle Diabundo, Associate Professor at the School of Health and Medical Sciences at Seton Hall University. And joining me today is...
Hi everyone, my name is Paul Franco. I'm a Corporate Compliance Officer for Human Subjects Research and Academic Affairs at Nuvens Health.
We are presenting participant-centered online health research, and this is a spin-off of patient-centered care and person-centered care. And the idea is that we are centering our focus on respecting participant needs, preferences, time, and input. We want to make sure participants are safe, comfortable, and emotionally supported. So we're doing our best to provide opportunities for collaboration with the participants that we're working with. We created this methodology with some features, and we started to think about where were people during the pandemic. And we realized that for many, online has become the natural environment for interacting, communicating, particularly relating to health. So researchers wanting to understand participant health go to where participants can be reached. So to understand what is meaningful for all participants regarding health, we knew during the pandemic particularly that we needed to go online. And so our research was designed to enable participants to provide their own preferences about health, their own values about health, and their own goals. So we wanted to shift that focus, which traditionally has been on the researcher, to the participant. So we created a methodology where we purposefully designed sampling and questionnaires to lead to optimized participant engagement in health research. So where did we realize that there was a need for this type of work? Well, we all know that there's a growing burden of chronic disease, and 6 in 10 Americans have a chronic disease. Most of those diseases are caused by modifiable behaviors like tobacco use, poor nutrition, poor diets, low physical activity, and excessive use of alcohol. And so then with the pandemic, we all know that those existing medical conditions put people at higher risk of severe illness from COVID-19. And now we have a lack of health literacy data at the national level. So based on my information, the last time we had a national assessment of health literacy was in 2003. And the last time we had a national action plan to improve health literacy was in 2010. And so we know constantly that policy is changing and the healthcare industry is changing. We need an effective program to develop sustainable health behaviors. And one of the things that we've kind of theorized is that one of the reasons why we may not be seeing the gains that we really want to see regarding managing chronic disease and preventing chronic disease is that maybe we don't have the needed information from the people who could inform our practices in health promotion and health literacy. So we believe shifting to a more participant-centered approach to collecting health science research may lead to increased participant engagement, leading to better tailored health promotion programming, and that may lead to improved outcomes. So in the spring of 2020, as researchers, we really need to adjust our data collection to accommodate social distancing requirements. And what emerged was a collaboration between my colleague who's here with me today, Dr. Franco, and another one of our colleagues at Seton Hall. And we envisioned these two studies as grounded theory because there was very little data available on the topics. And so those two topics that we use this methodology with was quality of life while working from home, and then physical activity during COVID-19. And like I said, at the time, there was very little data available. However, by the time we collected the data, there was a lot more information out there. One of the things that was surprising to us is that we had such large responses from participants. And so in the first study, the QOL study, we had 709 people respond. And then in the second study, the physical activity during COVID-19, we actually closed that much earlier than the quality of life because we were around 500 respondents, and we decided that we probably had enough information at that point. And we were making plans about how do we make sense of all this data, and we're going to share our what we learned through this process in this presentation. One of the things that we were really careful about in the design of this research was our language, because we knew prior to the pandemic that a lot of people had gone through trauma in some way, shape, or form. But during the pandemic, almost everybody had experienced some type of trauma. So we wanted to be really careful about using disempowering language. And some of the words that we found are disempowering in our regular practice are words like target, trigger, subjects, controlled, or masters. These are words that have a connotation associated with violence and a lack of empowerment. And so we were really careful in the design of our questionnaires and our informed consent to make sure that we used words that were inclusive and empowering, like priority instead of target population. We were very careful to use participants and not subjects. And we completely understand that in some of the other fields, particularly in clinical research, that the word subject is still being used. However, when we were trying to be more participant-centered, we know that participant is a much more empowering word, and so we're choosing to use that. Another example is thinking in terms of what will promote self-reliance and self-determination. Using words like managed a condition rather than controlled a condition are much more empowering. So we made those choices. We also are following what American Psychological Association has done, which is shifting from speaking as a researcher to talking in the first person. So we are not referring to ourselves as a researcher. We're using wording like we are interested in learning about quality of life from you. We also were really careful, and again, this is in line with American Psychological Association guidelines, the most recent edition, that we're not using anthropomorphic language where we're attributing human characteristics to a study. So we don't write the study will, we say we will collect the information, not the study will. And again, that anthropomorphic language is very common in research, but we're making the choice to have the work that we're doing be more participant-centered. And these are the ways that we're choosing to do that. As I said, these ideas were not originally, we didn't find them from APA, but as we were going through this process, we actually discovered that APA recently released some of the guidelines for not using violent language. They also have other categories of inclusive language that has to do with the way that we speak about groups of people, the way that we talk about age, And this is just an example of how they're communicating information about alternatives to violent language. For example, in many cases, you hear people say, "Oh, you're killing it." And they're saying a suggested alternative is "great job," right? The point is that we're not using these violent terms in our day-to-day communications, particularly when we're working in a research or education environment. The second one, take a shot at, it's the same thing. We don't need to include this violent language when we're talking about empowering people in the health environment. Something that I discovered a while ago, particularly in my PhD program, was that a lot of violent terms were used in research. And I was very conscious of that 20 years ago. And we talked about it during my PhD program, but there weren't a lot of alternatives out there. For example, in qualitative, we often see the word double-barreled to mean we're looking at two subjects or two topics in one question. We use bullet points all the time in our academic presentations and PowerPoint. I recently saw an abstract in health promotion. And in that abstract, probably 200 words, the word triggered was used 3 times just in the abstract. We talk in statistics about loading things and loaded factors. So we're really starting to pay attention to where we're reproducing this violent language and we're not even aware of it. Some of the words that we use just in violent terms we use in everyday speech that we're trying not to use. And of course, we make mistakes. I just try to correct them. I became aware of saying something like double-edged sword, meaning it's good and bad. Talking about people as deadbeats, being blown away, twisting someone's arm or breaking a leg. Again, we're trying to be conscious of it, and we don't expect that everybody's going to refrain from using all of these, but it's being conscious and trying not to, knowing that we'll probably not get to the point where we're perfect and giving ourselves a break, but just becoming aware of it. This idea of the participant-centered format for collecting data. And we're talking about doing this for questionnaires. So we thought, what's the best way to set this up so it's the most user-friendly and participant-centered? So we were really conscious of how to create informed consents that were easily understandable and that used plain language to avoid any misinterpretation by the participant. We also were very conscious about starting with qualifying questions. We want to avoid wasting time if the potential participant does not meet the inclusion criteria. So this can often be, it has to be at our university over the age of 18, or it could also be by location. They're very common inclusion criteria. When we were building our questionnaire, something that we were very conscious of was that we wanted to avoid those close-ended questions that were being used to confirm what we thought our hypotheses. So we weren't going to use words, questions that could be answered with a yes or no. The other thing, we really wanted to be very conscious of not asking leading questions, again, where we were being the focus of, we think this is our hypothesis and we want the participant to confirm that. And it's the same thing we wanted to avoid with those narrow questions at the beginning. And also, we wanted to make sure that we weren't scaring anybody away at the beginning by asking some of the demographic questions that might make people uncomfortable. And as an alternative, we would, at the beginning of the questionnaire, start with these broad, open-ended questions. that would get at what was top of mind for the participants. Also, we wanted to start with very neutral and hypothesis-free questions where the participants were getting to tell their own story. This was about them. And we were very purposeful about ordering questions from being broad to more narrow, so that the participant, as they were going through and responding, could get really comfortable, and by the end would share more personal and specific information. And that was the result of using this type of format. As I said before, we didn't want to use two subject questions, so we made sure that all our questions were very open, non-directed, and about one topic. And then we ended with demographic questions. The things that people might not want to answer at the beginning or be uncomfortable with, depending on the group that we were working with. This enables the participants to opt out of any demographic questions and anything that might make them feel uncomfortable. And so getting a little bit more specific about that demographic topic and how to use that more effectively in a participant-centered way. We don't force response to any of the demographic information. And like I said, it's at the end, so participants can opt out of it. We did not collect any demographic information that wasn't going to be used in analysis. So we really want only demographic information that's most relevant to the topic and will always be used in our analysis. This avoids any undue discomfort and wasting the participants' time. We also are not using these arbitrary age ranges where you see something like 19 to 30. We often use the exact age, or if we use age ranges, we use them that make sense based on lifespan development. For example, 18, 20 to 25-year-olds are at a certain point in their lifespan, and that would be grouped together. But we also are very conscious of checking with the participant population for the most culturally appropriate approach. And we would know that prior to collecting that data. One of the things that we also learned is that we weren't going to limit gender or race, ethnicity, or nationality to one response. So we're allowing for multiple responses in those categories to allow for the range of identity relating to gender or race. Our participant-centered participation was designed to promote the participant as the focus of the questionnaire. So one of the things that we were very conscious of was to avoid these lengthy questionnaires that would take a lot of the participants' time. And we wanted to let the participants know approximately how much time participation would take prior to. So we would keep that response time to around 10 minutes. And one of the things that we were very conscious of is to not assume that language is culturally appropriate. So what we did was seek input from the participant population in the creation of the questions, not at the end once we created them, but throughout the process. So we were carefully selecting our wording tailored to our culture and the priority population. And then we also did have the participants actually review the final version, provide feedback, and also provide us with how much time it took them to do the questionnaire. And then we were very conscious of referring from being researcher-centered. So we knew our goal was to have the participant tell their story. We wanted to consciously be participant-centered. And so we were always conscious of giving the participant the last word by concluding with some question like, what else would you like to share about this topic? So here's an example of the quality of life study. Our purpose was to explore quality of life while people were working from home. And so we were participant-centered, as we said, by asking questions about what would give them the opportunity to be top of mind, where they could share what was most important to them. So our research questions, for example, were how do participants define working from home? How do participants define quality of life while working from home? And then you can see when we were selecting our questions that we were including on the questionnaire, we were very broad at the beginning and non-directional, non-leading. How do you define working from home? We also added please explain to the back of that questionnaire, because keep in mind, this was all collected online. And that was a cue to participants to expand on what they might answer in a very short way. And that seemed to really work well because we got really great responses and in some cases very detailed responses. Another example, a very broad, non-directional, how do you define quality of life? Please explain. Again, it was very participant-centered with the aim to provide the opportunity for the participant to share their story without us leading them into their answers. And so my colleague, Dr. Franco, will continue on with the presentation by speaking about sampling, social media, and technology.
Thanks, Dr. Diabondo. So sampling in participant-centered online health research involves collecting health-related data from research participants despite the physical and social barriers, and this could include times of quarantine, which is when our research took place. We replace conventional methods, for example, in-person interviews or pencil and paper surveys, with certain virtual strategies, for example, survey invitation links, Facebook closed groups, and texting. Online surveys can provide unique opportunities for research in the COVID-19 era and can be time efficient, cost effective, and online surveys can also be interactive through technology, which I'll explain in the next few slides. So technology is really instrumental in the utilization of PCOHR, particularly in allowing participants to be the focus during data collection, allowing them to choose how they prefer to access surveys and provide information online. Creating online surveys, which work across a multitude of tech devices, allows for participant options instead of requirements, which may limit our participants' ability to participate or contribute. So it's really about focusing on participation and options as opposed to requirements. So for example, telling a potential participant to please use their smartphone to take the survey online may inherently weed out that individual who doesn't own or have access to a smartphone. Also, creating surveys from online platforms such as SurveyMonkey will be viewable and accessible on many different devices, thereby widening the pool for potential participant involvement. And in using technology, participants may start and stop participation at any point and may start and return to an online survey on their tech device at a time that is more convenient for them. So during COVID-19, many individuals began our surveys before work and then continued the survey during lunch or after work hours. Had this been an in-person survey, the individual would have been expected to most likely complete the survey in one sitting. Emerging technologies create multiple sources for data collection by means of participant interaction and involvement. So some examples of this technology include Apple Watches, Fitbit, Skagen watches, and virtual races using smartphones to obtain health data. Tech devices may be paired with gym equipment to record heart rate, miles jogged, and users may input sleep schedules and eating or nutritional information into phone apps. These tech devices allow participants to engage with the research as if it was in person, and they may be prompted to record a response, and if they were unhappy with that recording, they may re-record, which keeps them as a priority. So it really is participant-centered in that type of interaction with the research. Allowing users to select videos of their choice also creates an online research environment which is participant-centered, which is really what we were focusing on. So, in one of our work from home studies that took place in the US population, 95% of users said that they use a laptop, 80% use a smartphone, 20% use a desktop, 15% use a tablet, and 3% use other devices such as a TV, which we have listed here. Each device may have its own pros and cons, but the point is really to create options for participants to engage in research using devices that they are comfortable with. And it's important to avoid choosing survey software that may be outdated or not compatible with desktops or TVs, so participants are not unintentionally excluded. So just as an example, a laptop provides the ability to view multiple tabs or windows at once, preferably if users would like to look up terminology in a survey. For a smartphone, it may be faster as a device for users filling out surveys if their other devices are slower. It's the primary technology source for underserved populations based on the literature. For a desktop, many households may still have desktops, which may be a familiar option for older adults who may be encountering this online research, so they may really prefer to use a desktop. And larger desktop screens provide benefits for viewing the entire page of a survey instead of scrolling, which would take place on a smartphone or tablet. A tablet interface may be more user-friendly than smartphones, which may not reveal all the site or platform functions. And then finally, for a TV, users may prefer to access the internet or screen mirror through smart TVs for better viewing. Viewing a survey or reading an informed consent with a friend or family member in the same room would be possible with a TV. And finally, some surveys include a video viewing component, which require adequate volume, which TVs can provide. So based on our experiences conducting online health research, there are several routes for success that may be implemented. Choosing a known and trusted social media platform may enable increased participation from individuals. So, for example, posting a survey invitation link on someone's personal website or blog may feel intrusive to that individual, but posting on Facebook is considered more acceptable to reach people. Choosing a survey platform that is well known, such as SurveyMonkey, may increase participation because of trust and prevent a survey invitation from appearing as spam, junk mail, or hacking software. For example, a link to SurveyMonkey may be more recognizable to potential participants than a link to a company's website housing a survey or open text form, which may seem like an advertisement rather than research. It's also important to recognize that technology fatigue is real, particularly with individuals working from home. So because of this, use of color and minimal text may work best for users so that they're able to easily read and answer appropriately. And this can also prevent misinterpretations or misconceptions in the survey. Mindfulness of these approaches can create positive experiences for participants so that they really do feel actively engaged in contributing to this research process. Utilization of social media for online health research can allow participants to feel connected with other individuals. Particularly regarding health conditions, many individuals may feel isolated or discreet with how they share their health experiences. Survey invitations posted on social media, specifically in closed groups, which are monitored, may allow for discussions to take place on the post in the comments section. Users of the social media page may connect with others or be more apt to share information if they feel they aren't a quote-unquote target of a research study, but rather a welcome participant to the research or a priority. So that really speaks to the language that my colleague, Dr. Diabundo, was expressing earlier in the presentation. So that language is very important. Creating PCOHR in this way can be impactful for the participant and for individuals who may feel reluctant to participate in research opportunities. So this may be an open door and a welcome avenue for these individuals to participate in future research opportunities. So certain participant-centered aspects of social media in 2022 we may be aware of. Users are able to hide or block content or postings they find non-applicable, offensive, or repetitive. Users can customize their social media accounts to receive information tailored to certain topics, for example, nutrition, specific workout routines, music preferences. Users can also join groups that are meaningful to them and leave those groups when they choose. So again, they're the priority in the research, and it's really centered around these participants. Since social media group administrators vet and approve their membership, researchers can collaborate with administrators to tailor survey invitations with welcoming, sensitive, and mindful language for members. So closed Facebook groups were really essential to our sampling for our research. Closed groups provide for participant-centered focus as opposed to public groups. So the closed groups have controlled membership, and they're vetted by administrators in order to join the group. They're managed by administrators who vet the participants through a membership form that they are required to fill out, and it increases the likelihood of participation and true responses from those individuals. Also, the ability to follow up with closed group members who are loyal to the group's success is really something that closed groups provide, specifically on Facebook. And then identifying Facebook groups by category can yield higher numbers. So this is also another aspect of that participant-centered focus that we are discussing. So choosing groups by name, such as fitness lovers, can really appeal to certain individuals for your research that may be part of a fitness group. And if that's what your research is about, going to that membership would really be ideal to enhance participation. Groups by size, so a researcher can look at the membership and see if it's a larger group that may yield the potential for higher participation. Groups by theme, there are many different themes that take place in these groups. One example is recipe sharing for healthy eating at home during the pandemic. You can also look at groups by purpose, such as survey exchange groups, and groups by age since the inception, greater than a decade versus 1 month. So the participation size will really be different depending on when that group was formed. So overall, our experiences with technology for PCOHR have been successful to achieve higher participant numbers and more engaged participants, and mindful approaches to data collection while keeping the participants as the focus can really be fruitful in obtaining valuable results applicable to your population of interest.
And our PCOHR stepwise data collection analysis is meant to provide all of you with the opportunity to utilize this approach to research. And so we've broken it down into the step along with the process. So you can see you'll create a survey or a questionnaire, and then you're, as Dr. Franco mentioned, selecting a trusted way of collecting that data. So some type of platform like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics. And then he also talked about creating a plan for social media access. And one of the things that we really liked about the closed Facebook groups is that they had an administrator, and we would be confident that with an administrator who was in charge of admission, where a person would request being part of that group, for example, the fitness lovers, then the administrator would approve it or disapprove it, and that would create the membership for the group, and that would prevent the admission of a bot or somebody that was not interested in that topic. And then we would post the link or invitation first, and then the survey link to the potential participants. And that's also when the informed consent would be accessible too. So if the participant clicked on the link, they would be brought to informed consent first, and then into the area where they would have the qualifying questions. And then we went through a process of reposting where we would post to originally, and then we would plan out a certain amount of time that we'd then repost to that group. And then after the data, we got to the point where we had enough information where we said regarding the physical activity around 500, we knew that was significant for us to be able to answer our purpose and our research questions. So at that point, we would be able to take that raw information from SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics and export it from that platform to Excel, where we would clean up the data, which would mean that we might make sure that nobody under 18 responded, or that somebody was not having the same response throughout, or that they had answered at least 80% of the questions to be included in that final data analysis. So we also kept that information on password protected computers to make sure we're being very conscious of the privacy of our participants. The cleaning of the data, as I mentioned, we removed any non-applicable respondents. We categorized and sorted the data. Now, the reason why we really thought about this was that with our work, we had qualitative responses, and that ended up being quite a bit of data. As we mentioned, we qualified as big qual, which was over 100 responses. And when we started this, we weren't expecting that we would have so much data to handle. So one of the ways that we did that handled it was by thinking about geographic region. For example, with the physical activity data, we split it up by US responses versus UK. And then we further split it up because we had people from Australia. We then categorized by geographic region, and that made it easier for us to then be able to do a meaningful data analysis. We exported the cleaned data set into a qualitative software. Of course, you can use whatever you have. We use Atlas TI, and there's also an Excel extension where you can do coding, and Vivo. There's lots of different software that's available now. And then when we did the analysis, we definitely were learning from the process. So we did open coding first, and then we continued to learn more about how to use that coding effectively. So we did our open coding really as a first level, and then we would often do second level, and then even a third level where we would go and look at a more thematic way of coding the data. So it might be that we started to think about that quality of life data in a different way. So we would add that element, for example, focusing more on social life. So we would go and do a recoding. So it was a really flexible way of analysis. And that's really important. One of the things that we wanted to talk about with PCOHR data analysis is that it can be really overwhelming to a new researcher in having to handle this amount of data. So there was a lot of flexibility regarding how we chose to analyze the data. So when we were first learning about this, we chose to think in a more quantitative way, where we might take all the responses to how do you define working from home? And we would look at all of the responses in that column. Now, that's a very quantified way of doing data analysis, because traditionally when we're doing work in SPSS, we might look at calculating means and medians for the response to one question. So that was an opportunity for us to start to get to know the responses. And when we did our first conference, we basically did one poster on the responses from just one of those questions, just for the US respondents. That helped us start to get to know the data in a way that we could start to think about it in a more qualitative way. And then we were able to do data analysis in a way of which we describe as a case, like in an interview, where we looked at the responses to the entire survey for one of the participants. So that was a much more qualitative approach where we're treating all the responses like a transcript from an interview. And so we had a lot of opportunities to really learn about how could we use this information depending on what our skill level was. And our skill level changed as we were collecting the data and understanding how we could make sense and meaningfully report that data. And one of the things that we were challenged with was how do we include this demographic information in a way that's meaningful? Because we had all these qualitative responses. And with Atlas, it wasn't like an SPSS where we could click a button and we could get analysis for gender, for example, and have that sort that. So the way that we ended up doing it is we started with these subgroups for coding. And so the first one, as I said before, was that we would use the geographic location. And then later, as we went along, we said, oh, it's interesting because we have a large group of college students. So we would pull out the college student responses, and that was a way of creating a subgroup for coding. And that was a very effective way for looking at a life stage of our respondent and how that might be different from somebody that was graduated from college or a person that was an older adult who was retired. And we learned that it's really important for these large qualitative data sets to have a software in order for you to stay organized and maintain your sanity during this process. We really were feeling a bit of overwhelmed with the first study when we had 709 responses. But as we learned the software and we continue to learn it, we're much more confident in the way that we're handling that data. So as I mentioned, one of our successes is that we had an unexpectedly large number of quality responses from around the world, which was so exciting to us. We had a wide range of responses by age, region, employment status, student status, and race. And one of the very interesting things that we're still reflecting about is that we had a very much higher than expected Asian Pacific Islander participation. In the QLL study, 25% of our participants were from the Asian Pacific Islander community, and 13% were in the physical activity study. And that's something that we're really thinking about, and we're doing a little bit of research about. And then it started getting us thinking about the way that we're choosing the groups on our Facebook or our other social media platforms in order to be racially and ethnically diverse, in thinking about purposefully selecting groups that reflect diversity. And then one of the things that we're so excited about is that the respondents were really enthusiastic. We got feedback and emails from people that participated saying, great survey, great questionnaire, it was really interesting and well designed. When will the research results be available for us? And people championed the survey. They shared it on their own social media. And that was really exciting because we learned that being purposeful and participant-centered really does pay off. And it's a really great way to collect health data. And then we were thinking about these innovations in the health data analysis that were emerging and how our skills were changing, and that we were starting to learn about all the resources that were available out there that we didn't know about prior to this. And then advantages were that we truly were able to go beyond geographic boundaries. And that was so exciting to us. The other thing is that this was very low cost and had a quick turnaround which enabled data collection to happen during this time of social distancing. And we really need to think about the power of that when, as health educators and health promoters and people that are working in health literacy, we have these really important ideas coming up that we have to share. For example, the importance of vaccines. If we're able to reach out to a population and find out what they're feeling and what they're thinking in that moment, and then have this immediate turnaround, that could be a game changer for the way that then we're communicating in health literacy. Another thing that was so amazing to us was the ability for participants to feel autonomous in this process, to build that feeling of being self-determined in their responses rather than feeling controlled or pressured. And that was so important to us, and we feel like we did achieve that. So what are some of the things that we feel like are significant about this and that we really wanted to share with all of you is that we know that this may not be the last time. We hope that it's the last time that we're social distancing, but it's probably not. And also thinking in terms of how Dr. Franco was talking about how do we reach these general populations of people. And one of the things that we really thought about is being careful of really thinking about privilege and thinking about health literacy in terms of technology and thinking about how can we reach people. And one of the things that Dr. Franco shared is that lower income populations were tending to use smartphones. And so we wanted to be really purposeful about sharing with you the idea that we can reach not all populations, but we can reach general populations by using these participant-centered methodologies. And also thinking in terms of how can we really carefully design our research with words that will lead to detailed enough responses that it can create meaningful information for us, that we can use it to change our world. And we are so excited that we were able to sample about in time while this phenomena was happening, quality of life while working from home, and physical activity during COVID, which were such important topics. And it illustrated how we could use that online recruitment approach with social media and technology to collect this important data at that time when it was most needed. The online nature of this approach, the PCOHR, can enable participatory research through maintaining contact with respondents. And this creates opportunities for us to do things like member checks, to create participation in future research, to have the participants really be involved in a meaningful way. And then we also were thinking about how much we learned regarding how to address the challenges with these large qualitative data sets. And we realized that that approach to analyzing the data could be tailored by topic, by the coding skill level, by the amount of time that was available, and also by those resources that were available. And so we are so excited that you joined us today for this presentation, and we look forward to any questions that you have for us, and please feel free to contact us.
Thank you, everyone.